I, Countess now Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, 5th edition D&D. I was talking about the multiverse and relating to what you need to know about it as both the Dungeon Master and perhaps as a player. Let's talk about the inner planes, and specifically the elemental planes. Now, the inner planes envelop both the material planes and their echoes, and create this kind of barrier around them, and intermix the kind of primal energies of them into these planes. So, effectively, like the fire, water, earth, and air kind of get supplied into these from specifically the elemental planes, but all the inner planes sort of do this. The elemental planes effectively create this ring around them that envelops all the material plane. Now, at these kind of borders, you kind of begin to see blending. Of course, there's the blendings between the borders of each of these elemental planes, but as you get close to the material plane, you find that it almost mimics the material planes in many ways. It's very close to it, though there is this kind of underlying element of whatever element it is. So if it would be like the plane of earth, there would be a lot of land masses and stuff, especially like rocky, mountain. As you enter in this area closest to the material plane, of course, many elementally like kind of blooded creatures will find themselves there, or things related to that element. Some of them may have originally been from the material plane and come here. Others might be sort of originated from there. As you get farther from the material plane, though, things get less and less friendly, become more alien and hostile until they get to areas at the farthest reaches of these planes, farthest away from the material plane, where they're almost entirely the primal element that they would exist as. If it's the plane of earth, it would be solid earth, pure fire on fire, just endless air and air, just the most pure, pristine water and water. And there are very few things that would exist there other than these elemental spirits. And this is also the domain of the elemental princes of evil. They exist there too. Of course, they don't necessarily mean that they're not little mixes here and there, but that's another thing entirely. Let's talk about what's in between these elemental planes, and what really engulfs all of them and the inner planes is the elemental chaos. This elemental chaos is this kind of sphere that encompasses all the elemental planes and all the inner planes and acts as the kind of outer area between everything. The elemental chaos is this kind of combination of all four elements that churns and bubbles together, where very little things travel in between. You will occasionally find elemental spirits of the various types traveling in there, but they don't like being in there for long. There's something disconcerting about encountering all four elements at the same time. But then you find some other interesting creatures there. Hybrid elementals, things that are created from multiple elements at the same time. These are rare and unusual creatures that traditionally don't travel out of the elemental chaos, so you're probably only going to find them there if you even ever think about encountering them. Now let's talk about the elemental plane of air. The elemental plane of air is all about movement and kind of enriling winds. It's filled with breezes and gales that travel throughout it. You will, of course, still find elements, like little chunks of earth and rock that have attempted from things from the plane of earth getting in there. These are where a lot of the creatures that live within the plane of air actually exist on, that they make their homes on these kind of drifting, floating pieces of earth. Of course, there are places where the magic permeates some of the clouds and things that exist there, and they create solid clouds, which is another place where a lot of the creatures that live within the elemental plane of air exist within. Now, it itself is fairly uniform, though you can find changes as you get towards the other edges of it. Like, as you approach the area of the plane of water, it becomes colder, and you might find rain and snow happening towards those edges. On the other side, towards the plane of fire, you might find it hot and humid in the air. And storms, of course, do happen there, but originally they're like thunderstorms at most. You would get maybe up towards hurricanes or tornadoes, very, very rarely. And as I said, unless you're close to the plane of water, you're not going to get rain or snow at all. Now, the winds and the gales that exist in it create something called the labyrinth of winds that exists throughout it, where it's this kind of twisted number of kind of air routes that you'd have to sort of navigate in between. There are very many hidden areas in amongst this that makes it very difficult to reach with the way that the winds move. These hidden places are places like Aqua, which is ruled over by the Wind Dukes, this like lawful and good place kind of in the heart of the plane of air. Now, as I said, as you approach certain planes, things occur. If you get close to the plane of fire and the Great Conflagration, you will find the Sirocco Straits. The Sirocco Straits, this area that sort of is hot and dry with like with like kind of cracked and dried earth, that sort of where things would live in amongst it. And as I said, as you go into that sort of border between them is the Great Conflagration, this kind of towering inferno of flame that separates out the two planes. Now on the other side, towards the plane of water, of course, you get towards Frostfell, you find the Mistral Reach, this kind of area of wind and snow that blows in and out these storms in between Frostfell. Any kind of earth you'd find there is covered in ice and snow. Let's talk about the plane of Earth then. It is about rigidity and stability and is the opposite of the plane of air. It's an area of towering mountains that go higher and higher the deeper you get into it, until you get to mountains that are so high there are no air around it. Traditionally traveling into this place or through the caverns and tunnels that you'll kind of link into it and find yourself in the depths of these mountains. And many of these caverns are kind of deep and open. The largest of all the caverns, known as the Great Dismal Delve or the Sevenfold Maze, there you will find the great city of Tao, where it's the city of jewels and precious metals, where they will spread out to other planes, other areas of the plains, often sending slaves and other people to gather precious metals and jewels. The entire city is crafted out of all these precious metals and jewels. The entire buildings, everything. And they have powerful magics on it that if anybody tries to be a thief and steal anything, even the smallest jewel from something, it will detect it and be able to tell people that it has been stolen. Thieves are punished by death, and oftentimes even their families are punished. So that is a highly punishable offense to even try to steal anything from this ridiculous city of gold and jewels. Okay. Forgot to mention that the Great Conflagration was also known as the Plain of Ash. Sorry to forget to mention that, the area in between the air and fire. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. So let's talk about the area between the fire and the earth plane. Near an area known as the Fountain of Creation called the Furnaces. The Furnaces is this place of fire and melting metal where there's a lot of actual furnaces and forges where a lot of Tao's metals and materials are refined down into their purest form in this place of fire and earth. On the other side from that, over near the Plane of Water, is called this area of swampland called the Swamps of Oblivion, or the Plain of Ooze as it's known as. That's why I wanted to mention the Plain of Ash, because there's a Plain of Ooze too. This is kind of stagnant swampland, thickets of reeds and monstrous swarms of mosquitoes, where those that try to survive there either have to sort of get floating structures or put their housing up in trees strung between it, because you can't put any kind of things down into it. There's only mud below. Only mud. There is no solid ground, so you can't put like big sticks down into the mud. You either have to float on it or be on one of these trees that somehow survive within this and are stable within this mud and gunk. It is said that anything that is put into this area is lost for at least a century. So people have been known to send magic items that they want gone for a period of time to this place, and there are many people that are willing to explore it in order to find some of these lost magic items, but it is a horrible place to try to explore. Now, a little farther inland is the area known as Mud Hills. There are these kind of areas of perpetual landslides of rock and mud that tumble down into the Swamp of Oblivion, into the bottomless pit of muck. And it always seems that somehow the plane of Earth constantly refreshes it, so there's a constant supply of rock and stuff falling into the mud down below that never seems to end. So that's it for today. I talked about the basics of the inner planes. I talked about the elemental planes. I introduced you to the elemental plane of air and the elemental plane of earth. Next time, I'm going to talk about the elemental planes of fire and water and introduce you to the outer planes. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to be part of the channel, the empire, and the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, check out my Patreon, linked in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.